When describing small cells, you start thinking about the cell sizes and the terminology. So typically, when you start talking about cell sites, you start talking about things like macro cells, they're for coverage. You then start looking at sort of covering rural areas. We then start going into smaller cells, and the terminology from macro goes to micro, which is again there for more capacity reasons. So smaller cells, more linking into sort of more dense areas. And as you get into the very urban areas, we start talking about going even smaller. So the term picocells is starting to be used. However, generally, when you start talking about the term small cells, we're talking about this combination of sort of picocells and microcells, providing, again, more cells in a geographical area. And you'll hear this term densification of cells, as in more cells, more capacity being thrown into that particular geographical area. So when you start looking at the cell sites, you'll have cells for coverage, so providing sort of extended range capabilities. They're typically utilising the low band spectrum. We'll also have cells for more capacity, and you'll hear the term mid-band being used. And depending on the area you're in, you might have access to multiple mid-band frequencies to get more and more and more capacity. We also have, if we're on 5G specifically, the ability to utilise high band signals and millimeter waves to provide even ultra high capacity capabilities. Now, what's not shown on here is actually, is this a microcell, a picocell? How big is the cell? And again, it depends. It depends on the capacity you need in a geographical area. And this idea of densification, more cells going into a geographical area. So typically, when you start talking about small cells, what we're talking about is these capacity cells being put in certain geographical locations. So we talk about putting them onto, say, street furniture, onto lampposts, for example, or light poles. You might be onto some utility poles, you might be onto some strands, different permutations, different ways of implementing a small cell to get that densification in a geographical area.